welcome back. Today is the first day of December, which means it is time to wrap up my reading for November. I had a slow start to my reading in November. I didn't read a ton. I read a little bit in the beginning and then I didn't read a lot in the middle, and then I finished a bunch of things right like towards the end of the month. So I have 7 books to talk about today, which is pretty good, and I liked pretty much everything that I read. Well, actually, yeah, I would say I liked pretty much everything I read. There is one book that I didn't like so much. I definitely wanted to read more, and I definitely had like kind of grander plans for what I was going to read. I really wanted to read more nonfiction because it was Nonfiction November, but I just, like I said, had like a lull in the middle of the month where I just wasn't reading a ton. So I didn't, and that's all right. It is what it is. Things are what they are right now. I just, I've basically decided that this whole year has been a wash as far as reading goes, and we're gonna start fresh in 2022. I read mostly adult books this month. I have one YA book, and then I did read a couple of nonfiction books towards the end. Like the last 3 books I read this month were all nonfiction, but I mostly read thrillers and mysteries. So, got not a huge variety, but I'm still happy with everything that I read, and I'm going to talk to you about them now. So the first book that I finished in November was actually a book that I had started reading back in October, and I just didn't manage to finish it before the end of the month, and that was In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. It honestly feels like it's been 6 months since I started and finished this book because November was an incredibly long month in general. This is a mystery thriller, I guess, that kind of blew up on BookTube in the last few months. It is about this group of friends who were all like super close in college, and their senior year, one of the members of their friend group ended up dying, actually was killed by someone, and one person was accused of the crime, but he was never actually like charged for it or like convicted for it. And now it's been 10 years and they're all back at their college to have like their class reunion, and someone is determined to figure out who the real killer is. Someone thinks that they know who the killer was, and so they're determined for this like reunion weekend to figure it out and like to solve the mystery. I really liked this. It was like a dual timeline story. It's told from the main character, Jess. Her name is Jess. It's told from Jess's perspective, but we're flashing back and forward. We're in the present day where she's at the class reunion and all these new pieces of the mystery are being revealed and things are kind of starting to come together. And then we're also flashing back to when this friend group first like became friends, and throughout their college experience, like how they maintained their friendship and all this other stuff. And it's very like dynamic group of friends. There's a lot of different like relationships within the friend group, and I thought it was really interesting. I thought that the mystery was really compelling. I was super engaged with the story for the most part. It did take me a little bit of time to read it because it was a little bit slower paced than I was anticipating, just because of all like the positive like rave reviews that I've been hearing about it, saying that it was like the best, most fast-paced mystery. I wouldn't say it's super fast-paced. It is like a little bit on the slower side, but I thought it was really interesting. I don't think it's probably like the most memorable book that I've ever read. It's definitely like not a new favorite or anything. Yeah, I liked it. I would definitely recommend it. I understand why it's hyped, and I'm adding my voice to that hype for sure. The next book I'm going to talk about, however, is not at all a good read. Like, I did not enjoy it whatsoever, and that was The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I completely forgot what the title of this book is. This is the second book by this author, the first being The Silent Patient, which came out a couple years ago and just kind of like blew up. Like everybody was reading it. It was so incredibly hyped. I actually was planning on doing a vlog where I read all of the like Goodreads Choice Awards nominees for the mystery thriller category, but I accidentally deleted the footage of me reacting to the list, and then I wasn't like super excited about the list in general, so I didn't like finish doing that video. But I was preparing for that vlog and I read this ahead of time thinking that it was going to be in the nominations, and it is, and I think it made it into the final round. However, I will not be voting for it because I absolutely did not like this book. This is about a woman whose husband died like the year before. One day she gets a call from her niece, who her and her husband practically raised, and her niece said that one of her good friends was found dead on her college campus, and could she please come? And so the main character goes to the college. Coincidentally, it's the college that she and her husband met and fell in love at, so she's very nervous to go back, and she meets up with her niece, and she kind of gets wrapped up in the mystery of these murdered girls. And there's also this element of this professor who teaches this like class, and all these girls are in this class, and he has like this whole group of like basically fangirls, that some of these girls are the ones that end up dying. And so she's convinced that the professor is involved, and just not really sure like how everything is connected. And it was just bad. Like, it was really bad. I'm not holding it up as much because my ring light is so bright and I don't want it to blind you because this is a library book. But yeah, it was just not good. Like, the mystery absolutely, like the conclusion, the reveal came out of nowhere. Sometimes I can put up with a lot in a mystery. To be honest, I actually, like, almost always can put up with a lot of things in a mystery if I'm like enjoying myself, if it's kind of keeping me on my toes, if I am even a little bit interested or engaged with the story, then I can, you know, usually forgive a lot. What I cannot forgive is an, like, completely out of the blue reveal that was never hinted at, makes absolutely zero sense in the context of the story, and it's just kind of like stupid. So yeah, I won't be reading any more from this author because I did not enjoy this book. I think there are a lot of people that do. If you are into like dark academia and kind of like that little bit of like a pretentious tone to it, then this is probably a book that you would enjoy. It is not a book that I enjoyed. I didn't enjoy it whatsoever. Like, one of my least favorite books that I read all year long, and I would not have picked it up if I hadn't been planning on doing the Goodreads Choice Awards vlog thing that turned out not to happen. So I read this for nothing. The next book that I read was the final book off of my 2021 TBR that I had to read, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This is a historical fiction, kind of fantastical, although not really. It has a couple different storylines. The main two storylines are these couples that are living during World War I and their kind of romance as the war progresses. It's being told through the lens of the Greek gods and goddesses. Aphrodite, I think, is on trial for cheating on her husband, and she is using these couples' stories to tell why, like, she's a great goddess and like why her job is so hard and important and all that. And I thought it was all right. Yeah, I didn't love it as much as I wanted to. You know, obviously there are these two couples and you're reading from like 4 different perspectives. And then you also get a couple of like bonus perspectives, like just some like side characters that have perspectives here and there. And then obviously Aphrodite and some of the other Greek gods and goddesses. And I think that it was a little bit too much. Like, there was a little bit too much going on. Of the main two couples, I was really only invested in one of their stories. I found one of them to be vastly more compelling than the other. And every time I was reading a chapter from like one of the other couple, like one of the people from the other couple, I was just not as interested. And not that it was bad, but it just wasn't like, it didn't keep me like in the story as much as I wanted it to. I listened to the audiobook of this one, and I did think the audiobook was really well done because it has a full cast, each character gets its own narrator, and the audiobook was a full production, and it brought the story to life. I do think the book is a bit too long for what it is, and I did find that it dragged a little bit in the middle because there's so much time period covered here, and there's so many people covered here that I just found it to be like kind of like there was a lull in the middle of the book where I was just like, can we just get some things going again? But I did enjoy it, and I haven't read a ton of fiction that's set during World War I, and so I did find that very interesting because I've read a lot of World War II fiction, historical fiction, but not a lot of World War I historical fiction. So it was nice to get a little bit more context for that. Yeah, I mean, I liked it and I would definitely recommend it. It wasn't a favorite, didn't give it 5 stars. Unfortunately, my 5-star TBR for 2021 was not as successful as I hoped it would be. The next book that I read was another one that I was reading because of the Goodreads Choice Awards, and that was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I read this one after I had seen the list and I kind of reacted to it, and I really didn't know exactly where that video was gonna go. Obviously it went in the trash, so it's not a big deal. I was trying to narrow down the books that I thought would be in the final round, and so I ended up picking this one because it's one of the more popular books on the list. It had like the most ratings on Goodreads, so I felt like it was a shoo-in to make it into the final round. I actually don't remember if it did or not. This is a mystery about a woman who one day she comes home from work and her husband is not there, and this little girl comes to her door and says he loves you but he is not coming home or something like that. And then she is stuck taking care of his 16-year-old daughter and having absolutely no clue where he is or what's happened to him. It eventually comes out that his company has been basically like falsifying their financial records. They're like a tech startup, and they've been falsifying their financials so that they can get like funding and get off the ground. She thinks that maybe he's involved in that in some way, and then the story just completely expands from there, and it goes into some very interesting places that I did not expect or predict. I thought it was really good. I definitely understand why it's very hyped. I understand why it has such a mass appeal right now, because it's just a book that I think that a lot of people could like regardless of whether they are avid readers or not. It's not really a thriller so much as it is just like a straight up mystery, and so I appreciated that it really kept me engaged, even though it wasn't like fast-paced, edge of your seat, like things constantly happening. But there were just enough like reveals, and they were spaced out enough in the book that I was really interested in what was going on, and I wanted to keep reading because I wanted to know how everything was going to turn out. I would give it like a 4-star because I didn't like think it was absolutely mind-blowing, but I will tell you that the very last line of the book had me crying, which I didn't expect because I wasn't like really emotionally invested in these characters in this story for the whole book. But then the very last the very last word of the book, I was just like, oh, that's heartbreaking and so touching. So I really liked it. Next up, I finished She Kills Me by Jennifer Wright. This is the first of only 3 nonfiction books that I read in the month of November. This is a collection of basically like just like 1 to 2 page little anecdotes, little vignettes about all these famous or not so famous serial killers that all turned out to be women. The true stories of history's deadliest women. So I guess not just serial killers, but also like rulers that were very brutal, and all these different sections. There's like 9 sections, I think, and they all are about different things. So there's psychos, but not the way the misogynists say it, bad femme, black widows, scorned women, poisoners, murderous mercenaries, killer queens, badass warriors, and avenging angels. So there's all these different categories of killers, and I thought it was really interesting. I definitely learned a lot. There's a lot of women featured in here that I didn't know about or had never heard of. That's one of the main things I like when I read nonfiction, is education and entertainment, like a well-balanced education and entertainment kind of book, and Jennifer Wright does that really well. My biggest problem with this book was that I did think it maybe each section was a little bit too short. Like each feature, each woman only got a couple of pages, and there were some that I would definitely have read like a full chapter about, like 20-25 pages. Like give me a little bit more, you know? So I think that what could have made this book like over the top successful was if she had selected a handful, maybe like 10 or 12 women, and she focused on them, you know, where we got like a full-length book, but we focused just on a few select people and we went a little bit more into their stories. I think I would have liked it more. I think it was really interesting and clever and well done, but I just wanted it to be a little bit more. Like I wanted a little bit more of some of these women. So it wasn't my favorite Jennifer Wright. I think it's good, but it wasn't like fantastic. It didn't blow me away. I read it, I liked it, and I will continue to read books that Jennifer Wright writes because I love her as an author. And finally, the last thing I'm going to talk about is 2 books that are actually like a completed series, and that is Mouse Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Art Spiegelman. This is Art Spiegelman telling the story of his father's journey in Nazi-occupied Poland, and then eventually in Auschwitz during World War II and, you know, the Holocaust and everything. But it's told through the medium of graphic novel. So it's like a comic book that Art Spiegelman uses mice. Why did I stutter like that? Art Spiegelman uses mice to represent the Jews and cats to represent the Nazis. And then there's other animals included in there as well. It's a story about his father's time in World War II, but it's also an examination of his own relationship with his father. It's clear from the very beginning that Art has a very complicated relationship with his father, and he has since he was little. And so I think that not only did he want to tell the story of his father during the war and to shed a little bit more light on what it was like during that time, but also I think he wrote it to kind of grapple with his own complicated feelings about his relationship with his father. He uses his father telling him the story as kind of the framework for the story. So we get to see Art sitting down with his father and his father telling him this story. And you get a little bit more context for his father outside of World War II. We get a little bit more context of who his father became as he got older, and as like obviously as Art got older. It's a really hard story to read, and I can only imagine how difficult it was to write and illustrate because there's so much here that obviously is beyond our control at this point, but is still so heartbreaking to know that this like actually happened to so many people. I think that the first volume is stronger than the second. He wrote and published both of these after his father had already passed away, or like I think this one came out maybe right before his father passed away, and this one focuses a little bit more on his relationship with his father in his adulthood. So while yes, we get to see his time in the concentration camp, it focuses much more on his relationship with his father. I think he was still really struggling with that. You know, it's clear in the dialogue and in the text that he has struggled with his relationship with his father. So I think that writing the second volume, he was still kind of grappling with that. So I think the first volume was a bit stronger, but I did really like this and I'm glad that I finally read it. It's something that I've been meaning to read for years and I wanted to wait till I could read it all in one go. And so I had the graphic novels on hold from my library for a long time and I was waiting for them to come in at the same time and they finally did. So I read it and I enjoyed it and I'm glad that I finished off Nonfiction November with a couple of nonfiction books, even if I wish I could have read a little bit more throughout the month. So those are all the books that I read in the month of November. It was a pretty solid reading month overall. I wish that I had read a little bit more nonfiction, like I said, but what can you do? Sometimes it's just slump after slump after slump, and that's how it's been for me for a while. So I'm hoping that I can finish off December strong and I can just have like a clean, fresh slate for 2022. Here's hoping that next year's reading will be better because it can't be much worse. Let me know down in the comments if you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video and what you thought about them. Do you have similar or different opinions to me? I'd really love to know. Also, let me know some books that you read in the month of November or maybe your favorite book that you read in November. I'd really love to know that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you again very soon. Bye.